What's up, Nerfers, and welcome back to my channel, where today I'm taking a look at some brand new CNC Metal BCAR Nerf rifling attachments from ZWQ. You might remember ZWQ from the S100 bolt action Nerf blaster a couple of years ago, but now they're back with some rifling for us. These were sent to me thanks to Steven at Break Ice in Taiwan, who I'm looking forward to catching up with again at Silent Night 3 near the end of the year, which will actually be hosted on his home turf this time. Now, Steven did give me a link to a Taiwanese website where you can buy these called Shopee. I figure though that if these test exceptionally well in the video today, some Western suppliers like your Out of Darts or maybe even your Frontline Foam, someone will order these in eventually and you'll be able to buy them without having to use Google Translate. Now, there are two different versions of this BCAR you can choose from. There's a 16 bearing one or a 30 bearing one. Now, having 30 bearings and being a CNC Metal BCAR, I think this is finally some tough competition for the Sabre BCAR potentially, and that's what I'll be testing it against later on. This does, however, have some very nice features that the Sabre BCAR doesn't have, simply due to the fact that it's a bit newer and has more modern design elements. Firstly, compared to the Sabre BCAR, instead of using 4 grub screws to secure onto the barrel, this instead uses a more modernized locking nut system. Simply unscrew the end off of the BCAR, and it actually has 3 very nice gripping rings to help you get that off. Slide that onto the barrel, take this metal cone piece out and put that onto the barrel as well, and then just push the BCAR on the end and tighten the nut. I can't stress enough how nice of a feature these 3 gripping rings are. They allow you to tighten it so much that it physically cannot be pulled off of the barrel no matter how much force you put on it. It also just looks really nice. Inside of there on both sides you've got the ZWQ logo, and up the front we've got a crenulated bezel which gives it that kind of more real steel look. So I think overall, compared to the Sabre BCAR, this does have a little bit of a step up in the looks department as well. Now, one downside I did notice with this straight out of the box is that some of the bearings were a little loose, so I just had to give them a quick tighten with an Allen key. That is a huge step up over the Sabre BCAR though, which you have to fully assemble yourself. And these bearings are also much easier to install because they don't sit between 2 bits of metal. Instead, they actually sit flush on a piece of metal, so you can just pop them in and then screw them in instead of having to like balance your finger or a dart in the middle of the BCAR so that it doesn't fall through into the middle of it. In every category so far, so user friendliness and looks, I'd say this has the Sabre BCAR beat. But the most important one of all, of course, is how do these perform for accuracy? So that's what I'm going to find out now. As what should come as no surprise to anyone here, I'm using my most accurate blaster, the Sabre Apex Prime. It's shooting around 300 feet per second, tuned with a 16 kilogram Sabre spring, using the most accurate darts on the market, Sabre 1.3 gram tournament darts. Today I'm going to be filming this accuracy test from 50 meters away. That's almost 20 times further than your favorite indoor entertainment focused Nerf YouTuber. Now, this target, as always, has a 1 meter diameter, so that means I'll be able to figure out exactly how large the grouping is after the fact. So this is 50 meters or 164 feet for my American viewers. Let's see how the Sabre BCAR does first for a baseline reading. That was a hit. Might not be perfectly zeroed. I'm just trying to get the shots actually on the target. Three hits so far. Make that 4. I think I am zeroed a little low and left. Not that that matters at all to this testing. That was a little bit higher. Just on the edge. Notably, they have all been within the torso height of a human being so far. Good to see they're all on the target so far. Not sure, that might have clipped the top. Could be a 1 meter spread now. Although the width left to right, I'd say is about 50. That's all 15 shots. Let's grab my screwdriver, because the Sabre BCAR still needs one of those. And then I'll slide this off. I only need to loosen 2. We'll go with the 16 bearing first. I have been finding I do need to take this little metal disc out and pop that on the actual barrel itself. Otherwise it's too tight for the barrel to go in. And that grip, those 3 rings there, they allow you to really tighten up hard on that. Now this one does have 16 bearings, or about half the number of what the Sabre BCAR does. So I suspect it could be optimized for a lower velocity, but there's only one way to find out, and that is to shoot it. And I'll be aiming at this same exact spot as with the Sabre BCAR. And that's a hit. Seems promising. That was too. As was that. And those 3 shots weren't all far apart from each other. Actually looking very good so far. That one was a little bit higher and a little bit further to the right. Back to the others. Same with that one. More towards the center of the target. I suspect this one just doesn't have quite as many bearings as the Sabre one, so it might not be quite as accurate at this FPS. I do think it's going to come down to the wire though, and I'll have to compare these on the computer back at home. Even if they're like just slightly worse than the Sabre BCAR though. This has better user experience with all the new features on it. Like the threaded connection and the cooler looking appearance. That's all 15 shots. Can very quickly and easily take this off and swap on the 30 bearing version, making sure not to lose this metal cone-shaped piece. I do quite like the silver one, to be honest. How easy is that? So maybe you have different velocity games that you play at. So quick to change the BCAR off between these 2. Now, something I think I failed to mention earlier is that even though this ZWQ one is a 30 bearing BCAR, it does it a little bit differently. So where the Sabre has 5 groupings with 6 bearings in them, this one here has 6 groupings of 5 bearings. So it comes out to the same total number of bearings, there's just different amounts of them in the rows. Whether that makes a huge difference, I'm not too sure. But the Sabre BCAR is, I think, 3 years old now, if you count the old Delrin version of it. So this one is just a bit more modern in terms of the feature set that it has. That was a hit. Similar spot. A little bit higher. A little bit higher again. A little further to the left. A little bit lower. That one hit the cinder blocks underneath. I think these are falling between the ball and the cinder block. Same with that. Up near the bull again. A little to the right of the bull. Back down between it and the cinder block. Right of the bull. Pretty close to the bull, I'd say. And that's all 15. Look, anecdotally, I reckon all three are fairly close. This 30 bearing one will look better on camera than the Sabre did, just because it seems to be closer to what my 0 is at the moment, but you can always adjust the sight either way or the other. So this will require me to head back to the computer at home to see if there's any difference. As an Air Force plane flies overhead.
Okay guys, so even looking at these results on the computer at home didn't help decide a winner. All three was so ridiculously close, it's pretty much a tie. All three BCARs with Sabre darts fired from 50 meters away, or 164 feet. They all shot groupings around 80 centimeters tall and 40 centimeters wide, or 2.6 foot by 1.3. Now to put that in perspective for you guys, a width of 40 centimeters is narrow enough to hit an enemy player standing front onto you every single time. Quite impressive for such a distance, and this is the kind of spread I'd normally expect from something like a worker BCAR at a much closer distance of 30 meters. All three of these options are doing that kind of a spread from much further back. With that, I think it's time for my final thoughts, which I recorded in the field before seeing any of these results back at home.
Overall, guys, unless I've just told you differently, there's not a whole lot of difference that I could see between the three BCARs in terms of accuracy at 50 meters. So it brings us to the other advantages that the ZWQ has by being just simply a more modern BCAR. The ZWQ has the thread-on connection instead of using 4 grub screws, making it much quicker to put on and much easier to get it on straight as well. You don't have to worry about over-tightening one side and having it twist to one side. It also has those 3 added grip rings to make sure it's on there tight enough that it never comes off. It also has the style points with the crenulated bezel at the front. Overall, a much nicer looking design than the Sabre one, which is, 4-year-old design at this point. There is one other major benefit to the ZWQ, at least as far as I can tell. It is cheaper than half the price of the Sabre one. That's going off US dollar pricing to Taiwan. Of course, the retailers are going to add their own margins on top of that. So it may end up being just half the price of the Sabre one in the end. There is the downside that the screws do back themselves out over time, knocking around in my bag on the way here. I did have to tighten some up, which you saw on camera before. And in shipping, they came with some loose as well. So I might recommend you put a bit of blue Loctite on there, the non-permanent kind, just to make it a little bit more secure so they don't back themselves out. Other than that, I think the ZWQs are a very solid option, a very modern CNC metal BCAR compared to the Sabre ones. Pick it up at the one link I have down below to a Taiwanese website, or potentially wait until some Western suppliers get their hands on it. Thanks again to Stephen at BCARs for sending this my way. That's all I have for you guys today. Like, comment, subscribe, and all of that. Here's 2 other videos you might enjoy. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.